Hello everyone, Sairam to all. So in previous lecture you all have learned geography first chapter environment. I hope you all understand the chapter. Okay, so in this module we will start history. So here is the content list of your history book. In your history book basically total chapters are 10 and today we will start with the first chapter, tracing changes through 1,000 years. So basically in this chapter we just talk about a variety of changes took place in the thousand of years in India. But before proceeding further, let's understand about the history and the classification of history in short. So let's start with the introduction to history. Okay. When the past events are studied carefully and systematically on the basis of available materials, remains and records, it's called history. And the person who carries out such studies and records finding, it's called a historians. Clear? So history means when the past events are studied systematically on the basis of records, it's called history, and the person who carries out such records, it's called historian. Okay. Now, do you know students how these historians arranges these events? That means the past events. So yes, they do it in the chronological order, right? They do it in the chronological order. Okay, that is events that happened first followed by the events that happened later. Okay, now the chronological order. Basically in history we just find dates with BC or AD. I think you all have seen in history book, right? So where we find dates with BC or AD. So first we understand BC is the short form of before Christ and AD means Anno Domini. Clear? BC means before Christ and AD means Anno Domini. That is in the year of the Lord. Okay. Now basically AD. AD is usually written before the number. For example, AD 150, which means 150 years after the birth of Christ. But in the recent time or year, we usually do not put AD before the year. Okay, now the dates. Basically dates for BC go backwards. Okay, thus 232 BC will come before 185 BC. Okay, just see 200 BC, then 100 BC, then 50 BC. Clear? Okay, now how to calculate the numbers of years between BC and AD. So the two should be added together. For example, just see 250 BC and AD 150 means. So here we can add 250 plus 150 equal to 400, right? 400 years. Clear? So this is how we calculate the time, to calculate the number of years between BC and AD. Now the prehistory. Basically historians made the study of time somewhat easier by dividing the past into the periods or era. Okay, so past is divided into two. First one is prehistory and second one is the post history, right? Prehistory is further divided into the three. First one is the Paleolithic, next one is the Mesolithic, and next one is the Neolithic. Post history is further divided into three. First one is the ancient, second one is the medieval, and the third one is the modern. So about prehistory, you already studied in 6th standard, right? So let's start with the prehistory. At the beginning, man did not lead a settled life but wandered from place to place. He did not know how to read and how to write. So the period of man's existence for which we have no written records, it's called prehistory. Clear? Now, that period of time for which we have written records, it's known as history. Clear? What is difference between the prehistory and history? Prehistory basically when we do not have any written record, and history when we have written records. Prehistory basically is the existing record and the history is the record of events of past. Let's understand these three periods of history. The history of the world or the man history can be divided into three periods as we have seen in previous slide: ancient period, medieval period and the modern period. So basically about the ancient period you already learned in 6th standard. This period begins with the Indus Valley civilization and with the coming of Aryans. Right? Now the medieval period, basically this period is started just after the ancient period. And last one is the modern period. So modern period basically consider onward 1850. That means ancient period before 700. Before 700 periods is referred as ancient period, and medieval period between 700 to 1850 period is considered as medieval period, and modern period is considered onward 1850. Is it clear? Okay. So according to your NCERT book in 7th standard, we learned about medieval period. Okay. So let's start. This chapter contains information about, first one is the time period of the medieval age, the major political developments in the age, importance of geographical knowledge like maps and the names of places in the medieval period. Next, medieval documents and the languages used. Next, new social, political groups and religious groups which arose in the medieval period. So let's start with the medieval age. So medieval history, as I said, basically between 700 to 1850, this period considered as the medieval history. So medieval Indian refers to 8th to 18th century CE, that is common era in the Indian subcontinent. Now basically medieval history was quite long, so that's why it is divided into two periods. First one is the early medieval period and the second one is the late medieval period. Clear? So this medieval history is further divided into two periods. First one is early medieval period and second one is the late medieval period. So start with the early medieval period. Early medieval period which lasted from the 8th to the 13th century. Basically early medieval period belongs to the Rajput Cholas, mostly Hindu rulers, right? Next is the late medieval period which lasted from the 13th to the 18th century. Basically this period belongs to the Muslim conquerors like Khiljis, Tughlaqs and Mughals. Okay, so now let's start. As your chapter suggests, tracing changes through 1,000 years. So in this chapter we just talk about variety of changes took place in the 1,000 of years in India, right? So here is the first change regarding the use of maps. Clear? So basically during the medieval time period, the art of map making, which is known as cartography. Cartography means the art of map making, which is known as cartography. Basically, which became a most frequent or common prevalent. So, as a result, various maps were designed at that time. So, here is the map which was designed and made by Al Idrisi in 1154 CE. So his map is very precious and considered nearly up to 3 century. But students, do you know one of the interesting fact about his map was that, just look at this map. The map were upside down. Basically, this map was made by Al-Idrisi. Al-Idrisi, basically, he was the Arab geographer, and he designed this map in 1154 CE. So, interesting fact about his map was that this map was upside down. That means, just look at this map. In his map, Sri Lanka on the top, and just look at this, South India in the north. Basically, in this map, South India is where we would expect to find North India. Second thing is, Sri Lanka is an island, but in his map it is located at the top of India. Now, the second interesting fact about his map was that the names of the places are marked in Arabic language. Okay, some are the familiar places like Kannauj. Kannauj spelling is Kanauj. But in his map, this place was spelled as Qanauj. Clear? So this map basically designed by the Arab geographer Al-Idrisi in 1154 CE, right? And the one first interesting fact about this map, in this map Sri Lanka on the top and South India is in the north. Second thing is, the names of places are written in Arabic language. Clear? Okay, just look at this one more Indian subcontinent map, but this map was made by a French cartographer, and this map basically was drawn in 1720, that is 600 years after the map first. Basically, this map is more familiar to us. Why? Basically, this map is quite similar to the map which we used today. The coastal areas in the particular are detailed, and this map basically at that time it was used by the Europeans. Okay, so the most interesting fact about his map was that Sri Lanka is located in the south of India. Is it clear? Okay, let's differentiate between these two maps. So this is map first and this one map second. So map first and map second represent two different maps or times. So map first was made in 1154 CE by Al-Idrisi, an Arab geographer. This section is a detail of the Indian subcontinent from his larger map of the world. Now the map 2 was made by the French cartographer in which year? 1720. Both maps are quite different from each other. How? Basically, even though they represent the same area, right? In map 1, we find South India at the place where we would expect to find North India, and Sri Lanka basically is an island at the top. The places names are in the Arabic language, and the Kannauj is spelled as Qanauj. So in comparison to this map second was made nearly 600 later after the map first. But that time information about the subcontinent had changed a lot. This map appears to be more familiar to us, the coastal areas particularly more detailed. Clear? Okay. Now just move on to the next change. So next change regarding new and old terminologies. That means meaning of various terms changed over the time. Basically, new and old terminologies past record exist in multiplicity of languages. We have changed considerably over the years. If the information change with time, so then language and meaning can also change. So the difference is not just with regard to grammar and vocabulary, but the meaning of word also changed over the time. So here, take the term Hindustan for example first. So meaning of the term Hindustan has changed over the century. Okay, so basically today we understand it as India, right? The modern nation state. But you know what? In the 13th century, the term Hindustan was used by a Persian chronicler. His name was Minhaj-i-Siraz. Clear? Okay, let's understand what is the meaning of chronicler. Chronicler means a person who writes accounts of important or historical events. Clear? Chronicle means a person who writes account of important or historical events. Okay, so in 13th century, the term Hindustan first time used by a Persian chronicler, Minhaj-i-Siraz. So basically, according to him, he just explained the term Hindustan. So according to him, just look at this map. According to him, the land and the areas of Punjab and Haryana, this one, okay, and the land between the Ganga and Yamuna, this one. So according to Minhaj Siraz, the land of Punjab and Haryana and the area between Ganga and Yamuna basically was ruled by the Delhi Sultan. So according to him, South India was not a part of the term Hindustan. Clear? Okay. Now after Minhaj Siraz, the term Hindustan used by the Babur in 16th century. Basically, he just used the term Hindustan in a very broader sense, and he include the geography, the fauna, the culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. Right? And same thing is Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro used the term Hind in the similar way like the Babur used. But at that time, this term did not have any political meaning as it has today. Clear? Okay, let's take one more example to understand the change of new and old terminology. Okay, so here we take the example of the term foreigner. So the meaning of term foreigner has changed over the centuries, right? How? Basically, present someone who is not an Indian, so that person consider foreigner, right? But do you know, students, in the medieval time period, a stranger a stranger or the term foreigner, a term foreigner used someone who is not a part of our society or culture. That means that person was considered foreigner. Okay, just for example, like a person from the Delhi and then he went to Agra. So in the medieval time period, that person considered foreigner. But today, someone who is not an Indian, only that person consider foreigner. Is it clear? Now clear the term new and old terminologies. I hope now you understand the topic. Okay, rest of the topic we will cover in next video. Now move on to the question answers. So the first question is, who was Al Idrisi? So who was Al Idrisi? Al Idrisi was an Arab cartographer. Clear? Now next second question, who was considered the foreigner in the past? So who was considered? Any stranger who was not a part of that society or culture was considered a foreigner in the past. Like a city dweller, therefore, might have regarded a forest dweller as a foreigner. Clear? Okay, now the third question. What difference do you notice in the map drawn by Al Idrisi? So, what difference do you notice that? So, in the map drawn by Al Idrisi, we find a completely different view. Here, South India is shown at the present North India. That means in Al Idrisi map, South India, no, actually Sri Lanka located on the top of India and the South India in the north. So, South India is shown at the present North India and Sri Lanka is the island at the top. Now next question is, who is cartographer? So who is cartographer? Cartographer basically is one who draws a map, and cartography basically the art of map making. Now the last question is, who used the term Hindustan for the first time and when? So Minhas-e-Siraz, a Persian chronicler, Minhas-e-Siraz, used the term Hindustan for the first time in the 13th century, right? When he was used in 13th century. Okay, now what you have to do, students, you have to write down these question answers in your SST notebook, okay, and you also learn it. Thank you. Have a nice day.